Welcome to the Fractured Families podcast. I'm Charity, your dedicated parental alienation coach, here to guide and support families as they navigate the challenges of high conflict divorces and custody battles. On this podcast, we'll share insights, practical strategies, and hope for those on the journey toward healing and justice. Whether you're personally experiencing these challenges or just want to learn more about the complexities of parental alienation and custody disputes, you're in the right place. You are not alone. This is the Fractured Families podcast where every voice matters and every story is heard. And if you find my conversation helpful, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share. Your support helps us reach more families who need it. Thanks for joining the Fractured Families podcast. My name is Charity. I'm your host. I have with me today Sallie, who's a mother of 3 children and who has been alienated. She's going to share her journey, her story of devastation and heartbreak. Sallie, thanks for joining the Fractured Families podcast.
Starting out in the marriage, it was it turned into a narcissistic abuse relationship, emotional abuse relationship that I figured out through therapy, through going to therapy and saying, what's wrong with me? Why am I so bad? There was no physical violence, but it was trapping me, if that makes sense, trapping me in rooms, telling me, why to apologize and, all of this stuff like that. And then it kind of went into a lot of stuff in front of the kids, a lot of ridicule, a lot of just devaluing, of me in front of our 3 children. So this was a 20-year marriage. Probably the abuse probably started about 10 years in that I really recognize, or where I sought help. I sought psychiatric help because I thought it was my fault. And then I was told through various therapists, you're being abused. You can get out. But I said, no, I don't want a divorce. Never want a divorce. Would never do that to my children. Never in a million years. I'll survive physical abuse before I do that. And then through, I'd say 5-7 years of therapy, I got strong enough and set some boundaries. If he ever locks me in a room again, if I can't ever physically move where I want to move, that will be my trigger to actually get a divorce. I threatened it about a year before I did it. And he said, you will be abandoning the family. The kids will know that you abandoned them. So that was a big theme of abandonment, where he did tell me if I ever left that I would be abandoning the children. And so that was really hard. But I finally, I threatened divorce. He begged me back with a letter saying he will never control me again. It was all his fault. And then about a year later, he trapped me again. He would not let me leave in the car from the house, and he would not let me close the door or stand behind the car and say I had to run him over. And I thought, this is it. It finally, I knew I was going to do it. So I did file and waited about a week, I guess, to tell him. I knew I had to file first. I was in therapy with a narcissistic abuse therapist at the time, and I had a great lawyer. So I did file. I told him, and he told me the boys, I have 1 daughter and 2 boys. And he said, this plays into it a bit with the female male thing, but he said the boys will live with me. That was that at the moment. So we ended up in a court case because he would not leave my bed. I asked him to sleep out in our guest house apartment, and he would not. And then he told our children that their mother had abandoned them. I have a quote that, I started recording things even early on in the marriage, just because it was a situation where I questioned, like, is this really happening to me? When I'd be kind of locked in the bedroom and being told all of these things, I started making recordings. And so one of them was, your mother he was 16 at the time. Your mother is holding onto the hand of the devil and driving a dagger into your heart and twisting it and twisting it and twisting it, like, because I was divorcing him. So, I mean, I've learned a lot about narcissism, and I hate that that's a throw around catch-all term these days. I really do, because this was a case that was truly fighting somebody who would not give in. And the ultimate ego wound is someone divorcing you, and I think that really was apparent in our case. And so I did file a motion to have possession of the master bedroom when he was actually breaking in a door outside to get inside, and then I'd wake up and he'd be in my bed. And then he took one of my sons and switched schools. He put him in boarding school, which we had never talked about before, ever. And he signed my name on the contract illegally. So the motion was for equal educational decision making. This was even before I had just filed for divorce. So he threatened me and said, if you don't drop those motions, you will force me to drag the kids down to court to defend their father.
How old?
18, 16, and 15. So with all the kids there, he said, and this is kind of typical, you will force me, if you don't do this, you will force me to drag the kids to court to defend their father. And that's when it's like this questioning your own reality type thing. Like, is this really happening? And then they all, the boys, they were the younger ones, but they're teenagers at this time. So then they block me physically from leaving with the support of their father. And this actually, I had this on recording because I had pressed record, and it was played in the court, and the judge said, stop the recording, I'm sick to my stomach, and what he was hearing. And at that very first hearing, which was just for a mother to have equal educational decision making, the judge said, there's too much the father's dragging the kids into this divorce. I hate that. He needs to be out of the house by 6 p.m. tonight. That we'll work out a parenting plan, but for right now, this isn't working. Because my ex-husband had brought the kids all down to court, and it was a mess. So after that night, so the court gave my ex-husband this narrative of mom kicked dad out of the house. So that's where it all, part of, the court case started, was mom kicked dad out of the house. Then we had a terrible situation just that night where they vandalized my house and closet, um and my parents were in town, and my boys were, what did I say, like 15 and 17, I think, the time. And one of them got physical with me, took my keys, threw them, and I said, so I tried to get my keys from him, and my nail like scratched him a little bit on the arm. And so their dad called and said, come over here. So they left, which they weren't supposed to. They were in my custody. He called the police and said I physically abused my son. They came over. No, this was not a big deal. It was the police. I did not. They heard the whole story. There was no. It ended up being nothing. But that was kind of the first episode that was like very emotional and all of this. So anyway, at that time, I said, I'm just going to diffuse the situation. Just let the boys stay with their dad for now, because my lawyer advised in this case they could accuse you of doing something. And so I said, just, they can stay with him for now, but that's not permanent. That was just kind of for the night. So after that, he took them from me for 2 weeks. I could not get in touch with them for 2 weeks, and they The boys would not answer me. He would not answer me. I finally found them at one of my boys at a friend's house. He was in the car, getting in the car with me, and my ex-husband found out about it, came over there, directed him to get in his car. They were like robots and they follow him. So that was the beginning of everything. So we had all of this was happening real time, and I kind of like knew in the back of my head this could happen. I didn't believe it really would be this bad. But we got a forensic psychologist appointed. And, I was at the point saying, if this is my fault, let me know, put me in the psych ward, like, I'm willing to figure this out. So she evaluated both homes, both parents and children. At this point, my daughter had just started freshman at college. So she was, away at this point. So the boys were home. But, she did the whole evaluation. The evaluation's under seal, so I don't know, it's all finished now, but I don't know if I can talk about that, except to say that, it was completely in my favor. And there were diagnosis, uh, given, and it was recommended that we go through reunification therapy. And there would be no contact for a period of 60 days to do the reunification therapy, which I now know everything about. And that was that. So we filed a motion to implement the report, and that was when the appeals and the suing started. So he then I also had we're in Nashville, and I had these are kind of the top people, Vanderbilt psychiatrists, child psychologists I was meeting with once a week. Um, then we had a guardian ad litem appointed, which he requested, who ended up saying, I agree with the forensic evaluation. I've, been around all these people. Let's do reunification. It was a case where everybody agreed with me. There was no like allegation of the only allegation of abuse was that first thing with the police that was completely not even the police in the situation knew that that was not the case. So the court sided with me at every turn. I got all of the orders. So he had the means to appeal everything. So he appealed at the Tennessee level, at the Tennessee Court of Appeals, then the Tennessee Supreme Court. And what he was refusing was to go to therapy. There was only what was recommended was reunification for the mother, myself, and the boys, the children, and then therapy for him and the boys and family reunification therapy. That was it. So he then appealed to recuse the judge. He sued the forensic psychologist. He sued the child psychologist. He threatened the guardian ad litem's law firm. He filed a application to the U.S. Supreme Court. Contacted Brett Kavanaugh. Filed a whole hired a bigwig lawyer in D.C. And said that you cannot equated it to forcing someone to chop their leg off for custody, saying that you can't require therapy as involving in a custody situation. So I was never concerned about custody. All I wanted was mom and dad. You have a mom and dad. We both love you. Let's move forward. And that was wishful thinking coming from the marriage that I was in. But I still always had that hope, and I still do. My only, I just said, you have a mom and a dad who loves you. I was lucky enough to have a lot of professional support in the beginning, and books to read, one being Co-Parenting with a Toxic Ex, Surviving Parental Alienation, learning how to parent and not bad talk the other parent. I never did. All I said was, you deserve to have a loving mom and dad, which I was always a loving parent. There was no problem with the children before this happened. It was just this narrative that was your mom abandoned you, your mom abandoned the family, she never loved you, and it went on. And I have that perspective a little more that now that my daughter um, was alienated for a year and her sophomore year of college. She did not speak to me. They cussed me out. The boys ended up being physically abusive to me. Um, she came back to me. She had the courage, and girls, I don't know if it's a maturity thing, but she had a feeling and she picked up the phone when I called after her sophomore year. And um she spoke to me, and she tried to tell her father, but he wouldn't allow that. You can't have a relationship with me if you have a relationship with him, and that's the whole issue that's super hard on her. But she did survive. He cut her off. He actually did physically attack her in an exercise facility that was on tape, and he got arrested. Took her key. He tried to take her keys and her phone, and then she got painted as having to prosecute her dad. So she dropped the case. It was really difficult with the DA and situation, but it's all on video. The police said we have to arrest him because we see that he assaulted. When there's a domestic assault, we have to arrest him. But then the DA called and said, "So you want to prosecute your dad?" And that's really hard on a 21-year-old. So, and then that got spun against her with her brothers, her dad, his family. He ended up draining her college savings account, cutting off her health insurance, car insurance without her knowledge. His whole family has now rejected her, her grandparents, her cousins. They say she's following crazy. I mean, they've been following the devil, like things like that with her mom. So the boys will call her and ridicule her for going to the dark side, that type of thing. So she's had a lot of therapy, and I'm super proud of her. She's now 22, graduated college, um, applying to medical school, but um, she's having to walk her own path through that. The My two boys are now 21 and 19, and they are completely alienated from me. They do not respond to texts or calls. My older son, who's the one who was sent to boarding school without my permission, it's been about 4 years. My younger son, before he was 18, the court ruled no contact with dad, so he lived with me until he was 18. The no contact was supposed to just be for 60 days to get the reunification therapy, but because of all the appeals, the no contact order stood. And because dad would never fulfill what was needed to get contact back. And so that was painted as mom took you away from dad. And so I was in a really difficult position I was a really difficult position with the court. I was trying to prevent the alienation or stop it in its tracks. I don't regret anything I did. It didn't necessarily work, except that I did everything I could to be able to move past it. I've done everything I can, and in the end, the kids have to mature and make the decision on their own, and that's what happened with my daughter, and I hope that will happen um with the boys. So, but they there's nothing I can do to bring them back. I stay in contact with them. I send them texts, I once a week or once a month, or just to say I love you. Parents weekend in college, I say I would love to be there. and they don't answer.
Yeah, so when your youngest, you had him until he was 18, and then what happens then? He just picked up one day and left? He just said, I'm done?
Yeah, so during that time when there was, supposed to be no contact, I left this out. There was a bunch of criminal contempt because, dad got him a phone, like a what do you call it? A, dummy phone or whatever, and he was
Okay.
communicating with him, um,
A burner
against the court
phone.
order. So yeah, burner first phone, exactly.
Yeah.
Then we had, so that so that's why it didn't work because there was criminal contempt. So he didn't follow the court order. So yes, we went through the whole criminal contempt. He was sentenced to 50 days in jail, guilty of he wasn't allowed to call him after we had phone records. He would call him. He gave him the burner phone. The older kids were communicating with him, so it didn't work. So the messages were still getting through that mom is holding you captive. And my daughter can, word for word tell you because she was on that side for a year. We need to rescue Will. That was my youngest. He's being held captive by mom. So she, in fact, was the one who bought the phone at AT&T with his money and got it to him. So we have all of that. So yeah, so then you have criminal contempt, right? So he doesn't follow the court orders because narcissists don't follow court orders. They don't mean anything. And then you can appeal them. So it doesn't matter. So we did the whole thing and it took about a year and a half to even get the criminal contempt to trial. In the meantime, he accused me of setting foot on his property, which was not true. And I was arrested. I mean, I was taken to be booked. So I spent about 8 hours in the booking facility in downtown Nashville, which was pretty bad. And so all of that, I was released. There was nothing ever came of any of that. His criminal contempt did. He was convicted, sentenced to 50 days. In the end, after 3 years, he was facing jail. At this point, two two my older son and my daughter had both aged out. My younger son, Will, was still with me, but he was in 5 months, he was turning 18, and he almost broke my arm. And we had some, it was, so I said, I did in 6 months before his 18th birthday. I said, I called my very trusted family reunification therapist, and she said, either they go to jail, either your son goes to jail, or you give him to dad. And I gave him to dad.
Wow.
It was almost I had seen what had happened with my older son, and my younger son was becoming violent toward me. And I struggled a lot with child psychologists telling me, and I have had the police at separate occasions at the house, but I made the decision not to call the police on them and have them arrested. And although their dad still tells them what mother would call the police on their own children. One time the phone got pressed. If you press the phone, because I was being held down by one of my sons on the ground and all the buttons got pressed and it calls emergency. And so so they showed up and I was in tears in the backyard. And I didn't know they were showing up, but I, said, this is what happened. I thought my arm was being broken. And they said, do you want us to press charges? I said, no, everything's okay. But it was still used against me. Your mother called the police on their son. What mother would ever call the police on their child? And so that's what they see. Although I have this professionals telling me you have to, children cannot get away with this. They have to learn that violence is not, okay. And I believe that. And another time I called the police, just to come talk to the boys because they got in a big fight with each other with a lacrosse stick and blood. And I was pushed to the ground, and I did everything I could to like scare them into this is not okay with society. I had a neighbor, there was a confrontation in my front yard. A neighbor came over, um, but I did not ever have them taken downtown. And I still feel that may have been wrong. I don't know. But that was, I kind of stopped short of having them arrested because it was not their fault. I honestly, I still believe in the good of my kids and that this was their father manipulating them so much that they were so angry they did not know who to take this out on but me. And they side with the one they fear. And that's what they were doing. And so I really had a hard time and I have a hard time with that narrative still, that they believe that I am the cause of all this. There's also, this was, people knew about this in town, their friends. There were mugshots posted on from the stupid social media people. It caused them to be at odds with their friends because their friends supported their mom, supported me because they'd grown up with me and their dad, and they know, what's going on. So the boys lost their friends, but blame me for kind of ruining their lives in Nashville because I said that they were bad kids, is what they say. But um I never said that. I always said to everyone, I support them. I love them. I said that to them. But it's this narrative. Even my daughter says to this day, my whole sophomore year of college, I cried um, to my friends that my mom had abandoned me. Um, and that's hard for me to hear because I was so actively, seeking them and trying for that not to be the narrative. But the narrative was and I somewhere in me I think the boys know know the truth, and that's what everybody says. They'll come back, they'll realize, they'll come back, and they just can't. I mean their dad, he would check their phone every night. He logs in and sees if they're communicating to me or any of my family. My parents are, it's complete grandparent alienation to my sisters, cousins. My parents have been completely cut off from um the children, and that he has the boys now. Um and then um, and then they also see that my ex-husband cut off my daughter financially. So when you come back to mom, you have no money. And but and I've tried to communicate, I'm fine. I can support you. I can, and they're over 18 too. So the court doesn't care. They're over 18. They can get loans for college. They can but he also uses money as, you can go on these fishing trips with me. Mom has no money. He would always poo-poo my career. Just, that's the whole backstory as well. I have a master's in physical therapy. I went to um Duke, Emory, but he would poo-poo that and said, mom has no money, mom is worth nothing. This house is my house. That's why he wouldn't leave. I will never leave this house. You have all this just because of me. So the kids believe that. So they say, you don't have anything. You stole this. So that's the narrative now, is you stole, because in the end, we were about to go into a real trial after 3 years of being in court. And we finally got a deal done, which, was I dropped all the criminal contempt, all of that, and I stayed in the house and we split the money. No, alimony, but I basically got the house instead of that. So that's basically, um, what happened, and there was nothing else. I didn't feel like at that point I wasn't trying to punish him. My whole point of being in court was to stop the alienation. I didn't care about money, and my lawyers always said, "Don't say that." But, like, I didn't care about money. It was never about that. It was, like, trying to stop an active alienation that was going on real time, and the court did that. They helped me, but he didn't, um he was in contempt. So what do you do when somebody's in contempt and they appeal everything? That was my problem. All the way, the Supreme Court, by the way, US did not, accept his application.
Shocking.
But,
Shocking.
he was and he's I think he's still I don't know if he's still fighting things with psychologists or whatever, but, um
It's just such a powerful example of even adult children who you raised through adulthood are so intimidated, and she doesn't even reside with him, and the
yeah.
power he has over her, both probably a little bit financially, but psychologically more than
Mhm,
anything,
mhm.
that she would think after 18 years that he would abandon her, and she's away at college. It
Right.
just goes to show the power that, again, using that word, the narcissism, but that behavior, those strategies, those tactics, that manipulation, the
Mhm,
control, the fear. You nailed it when you said fear.
mhm.
But what's so, like, even the whole thing is so sad and heartbreaking, but really jumps out at me is that he never laid hands on you, but he did to his daughter and the boys did to you.
Mhm.
So
Yes. It was
it's
called,
just
proxy abuse, and,
yes.
yeah.
Yeah.
And they felt like they had to carry that out, or they didn't have the control. I used to wish and pray that he would hit me
Mhm.
in the marriage instead of barricade me, because then I would have something, concrete. It's really hard, and even my daughter will say this now, it's not like he hit me. And he didn't hit me, he just wrestled my keys and my phone away from but he didn't hit me. And it's really hard, it's like it's almost worse.
It's a
Um
strategy.
mhm,
Mhm.
and, and the boys, yeah, they didn't have the self-control that
Mhm.
he had, of just using words. At 17, 15, the boys, and that's what was actually really scary about that was I'm really glad we did not have a gun in the house. I think it would have been a tragedy if we had. So,
It's just such abuse, and these boys that were raised by, granted, he clearly has his challenges mentally, but
mhm,
you gave them all the love that the kids wanted. In the end, you wanted them to have 2 loving parents, and all that all that is erased
yes,
because he completely rewired their brains
yes,
to be exactly what he wanted himself to be, but he refrained, and it's just sad because you don't know what the boys are gonna become, and you don't even have any impact at this
right,
point.
right, right, and that's scary, and I think that's what finally hit me in terms of actually getting the divorce,
Mhm.
was this cannot be their example, of a relationship. It just can't, and whatever I can do, whether this is generational, I think I see it,
Mhm.
and his parents as well and family dynamics. And so I tell my daughter, I don't know why this landed on us to stop this, but this is what we were kind of tasked with, and as terrible as it may be, like this is not okay. And this I'm not going to be a part of you guys growing up thinking this is a normal. You ridicule the mom, you put down the mom, all the stuff like that is just not okay. I should have realized it sooner, but I wasn't strong enough. Um, so
Well, sadly, sadly, Sally, is that even if you had, you don't know that the outcome would have been different.
no.
You don't know that. I mean, I think that people that stay in narcissistic, abusive relationships do it to protect their children. And
Mhm.
everyone in my personal life and every one of my clients and in my podcast, they've all stayed as long as they can. And
Mm.
they all think they're doing the right things. Never in their mind do they think me walking away is going to be the end of my relationship with my children.
No.
Y- Because you don't know, like, until you're in this type of abuse, you don't even know it exists.
Yeah.
So many people are like, "I didn't know parental alienation existed until it happened to me," and even when it
That's
was
what my
happening, I
daughter
didn't know.
keeps saying.
Yeah,
Yeah.
even when it was happening, I
It's
don't
you
know
know,
what
it's
it
real,
is.
it's real. And I said, "Yes, it's real. It's happened
Yeah.
to us and it happened to you." And there look at this book, there
Mhm,
are books about it and that's what really helped me or one of the things is just seeing like kind of the textbook pattern.
mhm.
And when you can see just not just the narcissistic abuse, but the alienation and when you see it hitting all of those points, yes, and you say, "Yes, yes, yes." This is, "Oh my gosh, I'm not the only one. This is like a real thing. I'm not crazy. I thought I was completely crazy and I was the one at fault." But then you see, "Oh my gosh, like this is real. Maybe I'm not crazy," you know?
They want you
Uh
to think you're crazy, though. They want everyone else to believe you're crazy.
Yeah, yeah. So, and that, it's been nice that that hasn't, worked. I have a great, uh, social and support circle, that has been, very supportive and helpful, and I'm lucky I've had that. But it's been super hard. That's another other thing I was reading about, just the isolation of this when I still, you go to the high school football game and you go to the thing and everybody's talking about, "Oh, how's your daughter doing in college?" And I have to say, "She doesn't speak to me." Or, "Where's your son applying to college?" "I have no idea." How are his SAT scores?" "I have no idea." And that's super isolating and it still is. And it makes you not want to go to anything. And then it's like, are you just feeling sorry for yourself? You can't be mad at other people just for having normal families just because you don't. But it does feel super isolating and also just parenting with trying to parent as the targeted parent is a different type of parenting that I
Mhm.
learned when because you want to be the safe parent. So it's not, I would have friends who's like, if my son ever said that to me, I would throw the whole pot of spaghetti on his head. And you think, well, if I did that, I would be arrested. First of all, can't do that. And you also you're constantly trying to understand them, but also discipline them. It's a very different way of parenting. Like my sons, they'll say something terrible to me, "I hate you, you're a blah, 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 blah." And I say, "I'm sorry for what you've been through. I love you. I hear you and would love to talk more, you know? And a lot of parents don't understand that. They would say, if my
Mhm.
son called me that, I would say, "Get out of here," Um, so, uh, yeah.
It's a different level of parenting where you're no longer a parent. You're in a constant state of defending yourself. And
Mhm.
every act of normal parenting becomes scrutinized and considered abuse. Why
Right,
can't I have my phone past 9 p.m.? You're
right.
abusing me. Dad would let me. Why can't I eat cookies all night? Because it'll give you diabetes. Well, dad would let me. You're a terrible
Right.
mom. And then he reinforces that. Yeah, she's
Yeah.
not going to let you have your phone. She's not going to let you eat. And so
Yeah.
everything becomes abnormal parenting, even though up until 16 and 17 years old, this
It
was
was
normal.
yeah.
Yeah.
You can actually discipline your kids, yeah,
Yeah.
but when you're, targeted, all of that becomes that's like the, "Give me my keys back," and, reaching in, "Oh, call the police. She's abusing" "she has
Mhm.
now physically assaulted you." That type of thing. And then the telling to the kids, that was what was so hurtful for me, is him telling the kids to tell the police that my mom assaulted me, or something like that. Or and that was just super hurtful, not to me, but like to the kids, to say that about their loving mom,
Mhm.
who I stayed home with them. I was, I mean, I'm not gonna say I was the perfect mom, but like we
Yeah.
had a loving relationship. So, I just have learned that's harmful to children to find out, or to think that one of their parents doesn't love them anymore, and I still would not do that about my ex to them. I will not say that, and, and he does love them to the best of his ability. I will tell them that all the
Mhm.
time. They need a loving father too. That's what's sad about it.
Yeah, it's sad because you wanted the best, you wanted all the right things, but you're right, it's transgenerational. The fact that so indicative of the fact that when he said, "Cut her off, cut off your daughter," the whole family just followed suit.
Yes.
There was no questions, there was no, "What do you mean? That's your daughter?" It's like,
Yeah.
"Okay, yes, sir." That's
And
so
in the beginning
indicative.
yeah. In the beginning, they were on my side when I first
Mhm.
filed. They said, "I know you need to." They had seen this over the years. They, were worried about him killing himself, tried to get him to be, had him evaluated at a psych facility. They were saying, we have to help him accept the divorce." And then once he turned, they cut me off. And, and that was it. And that was super hard because they were my friends and family, and they had seen this. His dad had written him a letter years ago, "You need to stop this, you're gonna lose your family." They knew what was going on, but they're so scared of I don't know why he's so powerful. I really don't.
It's the
Um
consequences. They all know the consequences of his betrayal in his
mhm,
mind, and you're a perfect example of his power of the consequences, and I said this on a podcast the other day, it's people who have been aligned with the narcissist, when you get them in private and you say, "Why are you aligned?" And they say, "Fear. We know what they're
mhm,
capable of."
yes, yeah.
Any final thoughts for our listeners, Sally, that you wanna share before we end?
One thing that I had to do to survive, I feel like, that was kind of a journey for me, was finding who I am outside of being just a parent.
Yeah.
My identity was a mom, and I thought I couldn't live, without if that were taken away from me. And so I think I really had to that was a part of me becoming strong enough to do this, was I have an identity outside of just being a parent to these children. And at this point, I've had to move on. The boys, I'm still actively trying to communicate, but I can't just live in this woe is me, um, on the floor crying all the time. You have to move on, and you have to find that you have an identity and a purpose, beyond just being a mom. And so that was what I've really learned in this whole process.
Great. Well, thank you so much for joining the Fractured Families podcast and sharing your story. You're courageous and you're brave, and you're right. You've got to find your new normal.
Yes. Well, thank you so much for having me.
Of course, thank you. Thank you for joining me on this episode of the Fractured Families podcast. I hope our conversation has provided you with support, understanding, and actionable insights to help you navigate your own family challenges. Remember, healing is a journey, and reaching out for help is a sign of strength. You're not alone in it. If you found value in today's episode, please subscribe, rate, and leave a review. Your support helps us reach more families in need. You can contact me on social media at Parental Alienation is Real and visit our website for additional resources and ways to get involved. Stay strong, stay connected, and keep fighting for the family bonds that matter most. Until next time, take care and stay resilient.